He said if I were younger and prettier like his coworker, he'd marry me. And that's the night something deep inside me finally broke. Stay with me till the end, because what happened after that moment changed everything. And if my story moves you, don't forget to show some love, like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories like mine. That night, Darius's words echoed in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. We were sitting on the couch, eating takeout, the TV flickering softly in the background. I had just joked about how long it was taking him to propose. And that's when he said it, in the calmest voice, like it was a fact. If you were younger and prettier like Cameron from my office, I'd probably marry you by now. I laughed a little, trying to make it a joke, but my throat tightened. He didn't even look at me. He just kept scrolling through his phone. My heart sank, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I smiled, pretending it didn't matter, pretending it was funny. But inside, I was falling apart. 5 years. 5 years of loving a man who made me believe I wasn't enough. I remembered all the times I changed my hairstyle because he said he liked natural girls. The times I skipped dinner because he said I was getting thicker. The times I swallowed my dreams just to keep peace. And now he was comparing me to some office girl, a stranger with perfect skin and no idea she was being used as a weapon against me. That night, I didn't cry right away. I just sat there in silence, nodding like everything was okay. But when he went to bed, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection under the harsh light. My eyes were red, my face tired. I whispered to myself, what did I do wrong? Then I realized, I didn't do anything wrong. I just loved someone who never saw my worth. I lay next to him, pretending to sleep, feeling the space between us grow wider than ever. Every breath he took felt like a reminder that I had given too much of myself to someone who thought I wasn't enough. That's when something inside me shifted. I didn't scream. I didn't pack my bags. Not yet. But in that quiet darkness, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone make me feel small again. He turned his back to me that night, and for the first time, I didn't reach for him. I just stared at the ceiling and thought, you're going to regret that sentence one day. And he did, more than he could ever imagine. When I first met Darius, he was the kind of man who made every woman in the room turn her head. It was my best friend's birthday dinner, and he walked in late, wearing confidence like a suit. When our eyes met, he smiled, that easy, charming smile that made me forget how to breathe for a second. He was funny, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I said. For the first few months, I thought I had met my forever. He used to tell me how much he admired my drive. I was just starting to build my design career back then, full of ideas and dreams. You're different, he'd say. You actually have something going for yourself. And every time he said that, I felt proud, like being loved by a man like him meant I was doing something right. I didn't see the small cracks forming under his compliments. As my work started to take off, things began to shift. My late nights at the office annoyed him. My excitement about new projects seemed to bother him. He started with small comments. You used to be more fun, or you've changed since you got that job. At first, I laughed them off. I thought he just missed me. But soon, those comments turned into arguments. He began comparing us, talking about how tired he was from his job and how easy mine must be. If I wore makeup, he'd ask, who are you trying to impress? If I didn't, he'd say, you should try taking better care of yourself. No matter what I did, it was never enough. The worst part was, I thought it was love. I thought his jealousy was passion, his possessiveness was care. I mistook his control for protection. When he said things that hurt me, he'd follow it up with a kiss and a, you know I didn't mean it like that. And I believed him, every single time. 5 years went by like that. 5 years of shrinking myself to fit into the version of me he approved of. I stopped going out with my friends because he didn't like them. I stopped talking about my dreams because he said I was being unrealistic. Slowly, I became a quieter version of myself, walking on eggshells, afraid to upset him. Sometimes he'd look at me and say, you're lucky I'm patient with you. I used to nod and smile, not realizing how much of my power I'd handed over just to keep the peace. But deep down, a small voice in me was still fighting to breathe, the part of me that remembered who I was before him. That voice got louder every time he made me feel small. It whispered, you don't deserve this. It took me 5 years to finally listen. 5 years to see that he never loved me. He loved control. And I was done being something he could control. I still remember the first time I met Cameron Lewis. It was at Darius's office holiday party. One of those events where everyone tries too hard to impress their boss. The moment she walked in, she owned the room. She was the kind of woman people noticed. Light brown skin glowing under the warm lights, sleek bob haircut, red lipstick that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. She carried herself like she didn't need anyone's approval. Darius introduced us casually, his hand resting on my lower back. "Babe, this is Cameron. She works on my team." She smiled, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you," she said politely. Her tone was kind, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. Curiosity maybe, or pity. As the night went on, I noticed how differently Darius acted around her. His laugh, the one that had grown rare with me, came easily when she spoke. He leaned in closer, nodded eagerly at her stories, touched her arm when he laughed. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was overthinking, being insecure. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. On the way home, I asked him who she was to him, really. He laughed and said, "She's just a coworker, Lyric. Don't start." But from that night, Cameron started living in our conversations. Every other sentence began with her name. Cameron came up with this great idea today. Cameron's so organized. Cameron says I should try yoga. At first, I tried to play along, to be the cool girlfriend who didn't get jealous. I'd smile and say, "She sounds great." But every time he mentioned her, something in me tightened. He didn't talk about me like that anymore. I realized I hadn't heard him compliment me in months. Soon, he started comparing us without even realizing it. If I wore something new, he'd say, "Cameron has a similar dress, but she wears it better." When I cooked, he'd mention how Cameron once brought lunch for the whole office. I'd sit there, smiling through the sting, pretending his words didn't cut me open. I tried to meet Cameron again, to see for myself what made her so special. One afternoon, I stopped by his office to drop off lunch. She was there, standing close to his desk, laughing at something on his screen. The way he looked at her, relaxed, almost proud, was a look I hadn't seen in a long time. When he noticed me, he flinched slightly, like I'd interrupted something private. That night, lying beside him, I realized it wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was intuition, the kind that whispers the truth you don't want to hear. Something was happening between them, maybe not physical yet, but emotional, intimate, dangerous. And though I couldn't prove it then, I felt it deep in my chest. Cameron wasn't just a coworker. She was the beginning of my heartbreak. We had been planning that weekend trip for months. A little cabin by the lake, no phones, no work, just us. I was so excited that I even bought a new dress, something simple, soft blue, because he once said that color looked beautiful on me. But on Friday evening, as I was packing, Darius walked into the room with that fake seriousness he wore whenever he was about to lie. "Babe," he started, avoiding my eyes. "I can't make it this weekend. My boss just called, big last-minute project. I have to stay and help out." I froze for a moment, then nodded. "Of course," I said quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't question. But my gut twisted. He didn't even look guilty. He kissed my forehead, grabbed his laptop bag, and left. I stood there, holding the dress I'd bought just for him, realizing how easy it had become for him to disappoint me. A few hours later, I was scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself. That's when I saw it, a photo from a local restaurant downtown, posted by one of his coworkers. I almost scrolled past, until my eyes caught something familiar. There he was, Darius, sitting at a table, laughing, head tilted back the way he did when he was truly enjoying himself. And sitting right beside him, her hand resting near his arm, was Cameron. The caption read, "Friday night vibes with the team." My heart stopped. It wasn't just that they were together. It was how comfortable they looked. How connected. I zoomed in until the image blurred, staring at the way he smiled at her. A smile I hadn't seen in months. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Not this time. I just sat there, staring at my phone, until the room went silent and cold. He came home late that night, smelling faintly of cologne and wine. He kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "Long day," he muttered, kicking off his shoes. I didn't say a word. I just watched him. Watched the man I thought I knew so well move around like a stranger. When he finally fell asleep, his arm draped over me, I lay there staring into the dark. His breathing was slow and peaceful, while my mind burned with a quiet fire. For the first time in years, I didn't cry into my pillow. I didn't beg myself to understand him. I just looked at him and thought, "You really think I don't know?" That night, something changed in me. I stopped being the woman who begged for his attention and started becoming the woman who planned her peace. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. I would make him regret taking my love for granted. He slept soundly beside me, unaware that the woman next to him was no longer the same. After that night, I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. Something inside me had quietly shifted, and I decided that if Darius could lie so easily, then I could learn to live just as easily, without him being the center of my world. I didn't pack my bags or make a scene. I just changed. Slowly, quietly, and beautifully. I started waking up earlier, going for morning runs in the park. At first, it was just to clear my head, but soon I began to love it. The air, the stillness, the sense of control it gave me. I signed up for a gym membership, something I'd wanted to do for years, but never had the courage because he always made jokes about gym girls trying too hard. I didn't care anymore. I was done living small. Then came my hair. I walked into a salon one Saturday morning and told the stylist to cut it short, a sleek bob that framed my face. When I came home, Darius just stared. "Wow," he said, blinking. "That's different." I smiled. "Yeah, it's me." He looked confused, almost thrown off, and I loved it. For once, he couldn't predict me. I started spending more time with my best friend, Maya, the same friend Darius never liked. We went out for brunch, laughed until our stomachs hurt, took pictures like we were teenagers again. Maya looked at me one afternoon and said, "You seem lighter." I smiled, and for the first time in years, I actually believed her. Then I found my old paints tucked away in the back of the closet, dusty, forgotten. Darius used to call painting my silly hobby. But I missed it. I missed the colors, the mess, the peace it gave me. So, I set up a small corner in the apartment just for that. Every evening, while he watched TV, I painted. Sometimes in silence, sometimes with music. It became my therapy, my rebellion. The funny thing was, the more I pulled away, the more he started paying attention. One night, he looked at me across the dinner table and asked, "What's going on with you lately? You've been acting different." I smiled softly, keeping my eyes on my plate. "I'm just remembering who I am." He smirked, leaned back, and said, "So you're doing all this for me, huh?" That made me laugh, a real laugh, one I hadn't felt in a long time. "No, Darius," I said quietly. "Not for you." He didn't know what to say after that. He just stared at me, maybe realizing for the first time that he was losing control, that the woman he thought he owned was slowly becoming someone he couldn't read anymore. And that scared him more than anything. It happened on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where the air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I was doing laundry, folding Darius's shirts the way he liked, neatly, with the sleeves tucked in. It was routine, mindless, the kind of thing I did without thinking. But then, as I reached into the pocket of his dress pants, I felt something crumpled inside. I pulled it out and unfolded it. A receipt from a boutique hotel downtown. 1 room, 2 glasses of wine on the tab. My hands froze. The date was from the same weekend he'd said he was working late. I stared at the ink until the numbers blurred. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I just slipped the receipt into my pocket, folded the pants, and placed them neatly on the bed. Later that night, as I ironed one of his white shirts, I saw it, a faint smudge of coral lipstick on the collar. The same bold shade Cameron wore, the one he once told me he hated. "Too bright," he'd said. "Makes women look desperate." I ran my thumb over the stain, my jaw tightening. He came home minutes later, talking about his long day, kissing my cheek like nothing was wrong. I smiled back. That was the night I decided not to be emotional anymore. Not to scream, not to beg for honesty. No, I was done playing his game. From that moment, I became quiet, observant. Over the next few days, I started collecting pieces. Little things. The times he said he was working late. The calls he took in another room. The receipts, the random Uber charges. I noted it all down. Every lie, every detail. I wasn't doing it to punish him, not yet. I was doing it to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. Once while he showered, I glanced through his phone. I didn't scroll too far, just far enough to see her name, Cameron, glowing on the screen. Their messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. "Had a great time," she'd written. "Can't stop thinking about last night." I took a photo of the screen, placed the phone back exactly how I found it, and walked away. My heart wasn't racing like I thought it would. It was calm, almost steady. That night, as I lay beside him, I looked at his face, peaceful, unaware. I realized I wasn't the broken one anymore. He was. He just didn't know it yet. He thought I was still the same forgiving lyric, the one who'd always let things slide. But this time, I wasn't going to cry or argue. I wasn't going to give him a reason to lie again. I was going to let him think he was safe. Let him dig his own grave. And when the time was right, I'd expose every lie he built, one receipt at a time. I spent 2 weeks planning it, not out of anger, but with the calm focus of someone finally ready to end a long nightmare. Darius thought everything between us was fine again. I smiled when he spoke, laughed at his jokes, and even made his favorite meals. He had no idea I was preparing the stage where he'd destroy himself. Our 5th anniversary was coming up, and he hadn't mentioned it once. So one evening while he was on the phone with his boss, I softly said, "How about we celebrate Saturday night? Just the two of us, somewhere nice." He looked surprised, then smug, like he'd won. "See? That's the lyric I know," he said. I smiled back and said nothing. I made a reservation at his favorite restaurant, the one with dim lights, soft jazz, and overpriced wine he always bragged about. But before confirming, I made one more call. Using a soft, friendly voice, I introduced myself as an assistant from the restaurant's events team. I told Cameron Lewis she'd been invited to a private company dinner in honor of Darius Hembry's promotion. She thanked me, excited, not realizing I was the woman whose heart she'd helped break. The day of the dinner, I took my time getting ready. I wore a black dress that hugged me in all the right places, simple gold earrings, and a calm smile. When Darius saw me, his eyes widened. "Damn, you look incredible," he said, grabbing his keys. I just smiled. "It's a special night," I whispered. We arrived at the restaurant, and I let him lead the way like always. The waiter showed us to a corner table with candles flickering between us. He was relaxed, confident, even reached for my hand. "See, lyric? We're finally getting back to normal." I let him think so. A few minutes later, I saw her. Cameron walked in, dressed elegantly, scanning the room for the company dinner. When her eyes landed on Darius, confusion spread across her face. She hesitated, clutching her purse, then slowly approached our table. Darius froze. His smile vanished. "Cameron, what are you doing here?" he stammered. She blinked, equally startled. "They told me there was a company dinner for your promotion." I leaned back in my chair, calm and glowing, my glass of wine untouched. "Oh, this is perfect," I said softly. "I was hoping we could all celebrate together." He looked at me, panic flickering in his eyes. "Lyric, this isn't." "Save it," I interrupted, sliding a small folder from my bag onto the table. "Before we order, I think we should go over a few things. Receipts. Photos. Messages." Cameron's face went pale as she glanced at the folder. Darius's mouth opened, but no words came out. I smiled politely at the waiter. "We'll need a few more minutes." For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. Darius tried to laugh it off the moment Cameron stormed in. His voice cracked as he said, "Wow, this is awkward. Must be some kind of mix-up." But I didn't move, didn't blink. I just reached into my bag and pulled out the neatly sealed folder I'd been waiting to open for weeks. "Let's not waste time pretending," I said quietly, sliding the folder across the table. It landed right in front of him with a soft thud. He looked at it like it might explode. Inside were printed receipts from hotel stays, dinner dates, and those Uber trips that always happened after midnight. Then came the photos, him and Cameron, laughing outside that same restaurant he'd told me he hated. And finally, the screenshots. Messages full of flirtation, lies, and those little phrases he once said to me years ago, recycled for someone else. Cameron's face drained of all color as she stared at the evidence. She didn't say a word, not a single excuse. She looked at me, eyes wet, and whispered, "I didn't know, Lyric." I swear I didn't know. I nodded once. "Now you do." She took her purse, turned to Darius, and said in a trembling voice, "You told me she was just a roommate. You disgust me." Then she walked out, heels clicking against the marble floor until the sound disappeared completely. For a long second, silence filled the table. The soft jazz playing in the background suddenly sounded cruel. Darius reached across, his hand shaking. "Lyric, please. Let's talk about this. It's not what it looks like." I looked up at him, calm and unbothered. "You really want to use that line right now?" His mouth opened, then closed again. His face was red, sweat beading along his hairline. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "I was stupid. I love you." I let out a soft laugh, not bitter, just empty. "You said if I were younger and prettier like her, you'd marry me. Remember that?" He looked stunned. "I didn't mean it. I was angry." I cut him off gently, folding my napkin and placing it on the table. "No, you meant it. You've been making me feel small for 5 years, Darius. I twisted myself into someone quieter, thinner, more accommodating, just to be enough for you. And guess what? You still wanted more. He reached for me again, but I pushed my chair back. You said you wanted someone younger and prettier, I said softly, meeting his eyes one last time. So go chase her. I stood up, calm and collected. I'm done shrinking for you. Then I walked out, heels clicking in rhythm, heart steady. For once, it wasn't him leaving me behind. It was me finally walking away from the wreckage he created and stepping back into my own life. That night, after the dinner that shattered everything, Lyric didn't shout. She didn't slam doors or throw things. She simply walked into their apartment, looked around at the space that once held laughter, love, and years of compromise, and felt nothing. She packed quietly. A few clothes, her paints, her mother's old journal, and the framed picture of her and Maya from college. Everything else, the furniture, the shared memories, the hollow promises, she left behind. On the counter, she placed her key and a small note that read, "You'll never have to wonder if I'm enough again." Then she left. For the first time in 5 years, she slept soundly, at Maya's apartment, wrapped in a borrowed blanket that smelled like lavender and peace. Days turned into a week. Lyric poured herself into work, into early morning jogs and late-night painting sessions. Her smile started returning, not the practiced one she wore for Darius, but a real one, the kind that made her eyes glow again. Then, one afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she saw him. Darius, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, holding a bouquet of wilted flowers. He stood by her car like a ghost from a life she'd already buried. "Lyric, please," he said as soon as he saw her. "Just give me 5 minutes. I can fix this. I love you. I messed up, but I can change." She didn't flinch. "Darius, you had 5 years to fix this. I made one mistake." She cut him off, voice steady. "You made a choice. Repeatedly. That's not a mistake. That's who you are." The wind carried the smell of rain as she got into her car. He stepped forward, desperate. "Please, I lost Cameron. I can't lose you too." Lyric looked at him through the half-closed window. "You already did," she said softly. Then she drove off, no tears, no second thoughts. Within days, she heard the rest. Cameron had filed a complaint at the office, detailing how Darius had pursued her while still in a relationship, lied about his status, and manipulated her to advance his own image. HR investigated. His spotless reputation crumbled. The company let him go quietly, for professionalism reasons. Lyric didn't smile when she heard the news. She didn't need to. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. She spent her evenings painting again, bold strokes of gold and crimson filling the canvas, colors that looked like freedom. She even submitted her first piece to a local gallery, something she'd once been too scared to do because Darius had said art wasn't a real career. Now, standing in that small gallery weeks later, surrounded by strangers admiring her work, Lyric finally understood what peace felt like. It wasn't the sound of him apologizing or losing everything. It was the silence of not caring anymore, the beautiful quiet of finally being free. The city lights glowed softly through the wide windows of Lyric's new apartment. A quiet jazz tune played in the background, the kind of music she used to love before Darius complained it made him feel old. Now, she listened to it every evening, glass of wine in hand, surrounded by the vibrant paintings she'd created with her own reborn hands. Her walls were covered with color, golds, blues, and deep reds, the shades of her healing. Each canvas told a story of survival, of rediscovery, of a woman who had once been made to feel small and finally learned she was more than enough. It had been 6 months since she walked away from the man who broke her spirit, and she hadn't looked back once. There were no midnight tears, no scrolling through old photos, no wondering if he'd changed. She didn't need to know. What mattered now was her peace, the kind that filled the room like sunlight after a long storm. Some evenings, she'd meet Malik at the local art studio, the one she joined after quitting the toxic job that reminded her of too many painful memories. Malik was gentle, soft-spoken, and had an ease about him that made the world slow down. He never interrupted her when she spoke, never compared her to anyone, never made her shrink to fit into his shadow. One night after class, as they cleaned their brushes, he looked at her and smiled. "You paint like someone who's been through fire," he said quietly. "But you made something beautiful out of it." She smiled back, her chest warm. Maybe that's all healing really is. Malik didn't try to define what they were, and Lyric didn't need him to. For once in her life, She wasn't waiting for anyone to complete her. She was already whole. The love she gave to everyone else for years, she had finally started giving it to herself. On her coffee table sat a single photo, not of Darius or their past, but of her first solo art show, where her paintings sold out in one night. The gallery owner had called her a breath of resilience. She liked that. It fit her better than any title Darius ever gave her. Sometimes, when her thoughts drifted to the past, she didn't feel anger or sadness anymore, just gratitude. Because without the heartbreak, she wouldn't have found herself. Without his cruelty, she wouldn't have learned the beauty of her own silence. She took another slow sip of wine, gazing out at the lights flickering across the skyline. The air was calm, the night soft. Her peace wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was in every brushstroke, every quiet breath, every laugh she no longer had to fake. That was her real revenge, not watching him fall, but watching herself rise. Do you think Lyric did the right thing by walking away from Darius without looking back? Or should she have given him another chance to make things right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.